Hello everyone, welcome to Kalam's answer writing session for the day. So today I've picked up a question on Representation of People's Act. This can be categorized as a hardcore polity based question with some current affairs tinge to it. So there are several sections in Representation of People's Act which come under debate every now and then there are certain suggested reforms in reference to this particular act. So one peculiar thing or one interesting thing about this particular question is that it is a previous year's question. This has been directly asked in the previous years of UPSC civil service examination. In this context, we're going to evolve the introduction, body and the conclusion format that we usually do. But before I do that, I'd like to give certain prerequisites which are related to hardcore polity based question or whenever you write an elections based question. So the first and foremost thing is the usage of articles if they are relevant. If you're talking about powers of the election commissions, you could talk about the relevant article and so on. In addition to this, there are certain acts which look at the conduct of elections, like Representation of People Act 1950 and Representation of People Act 1951 and so on. So whichever point you write, if you write it from the viewpoint of the one of these acts, it is going to give a legislative backing to your point. In addition to this, there are several committees on electoral reforms. Like for example, you have Dinesh Goswami committee, and you also have National Commission for Review of Working of Constitution. There are ARC recommendations and so on. So there are several committee reports which are related to elections. In addition to this, there are some reports which are given by certain NGOs and NPOs like Association of Democratic Reforms. This basically talks about the amount of criminalization in the society and so on. So these are all the things that you can consider as a prerequisite when you write an answer on a hardcore polity based question which is related to election. Now we'll move forward and read the question out. This is basically a simply formed question, as in you can easily convert this question into the separate side headings, but once you convert the question into separate side headings, you will understand that it is difficult to recall the points. So in cases like that, how do you evolve your points? That is one thing that we should learn. But in general, because it is a straight question which is talking about straight provisions of Representation of People Act, it will be difficult to create or generate points by ourselves other than the provisions that are there in the act. So what can we do? In those cases, what we usually do is to evolve separate side headings in order to increase the density of our answer, in order to widen the reach of our answer. So what is the question? On what grounds a people's representative can be disqualified under the Rpi Act 1951? Also, you have to mention the remedies available to such person against his disqualification. The spelling is wrong, available spelling is wrong, please correct it. So there are only two themes that have been asked in the question. The first theme is that the criteria of disqualification, whatever criteria of disqualification are there under RPN 1951, that is going to be the first side heading of the body of my answer. In addition to this, I'll move forward and talk about the remedies that are available for the person who has been disqualified. If I am a legislator and I am disqualified for some reason through a presidential order and so on, then what are the remedies I have in order to redress the situation? If I feel that I am innocent, I should have some kind of redressal mechanism. What are the options that are available? That is something that I'll talk about. So these are just the two side headings that are directly coming out from the answer. What else coming out from the question? What else can be evolved? How about writing in brief about the Representation of People's Act 1951? You could talk about certain provisions of RPA 1951. RPA 1951 is not just about qualification and disqualification of legislators. There are also other things involved. It talks about the administrative machinery that is related to the elections. And then it also talks about the registration of political parties and so on. So these are the provisions that you can write of Representation of People's Act, and these points are easy to recall because if you read Lakshmikant and you do your Lakshmikant well, you'll be able to evolve these points. So these points are more or less relevant to my answer, so I'll write them down. In addition to this, if there is space left, I will probably write the suggested reforms. See, there are criteria of disqualification in Representation of People's Act, there are remedies available in case the person feels that he is innocent. In addition to this, what are some suggested reforms that we would like to suggest the examiner? So this is going to be the basic broad framework of my answer, the body of my answer. In addition to this, I have to start with an introduction. I could start by the Representation of People's Act and a summary of it. That is a definitional approach of starting my answer. Or I could start with a current affairs based question, a current affairs based fact. Like for example, in recent years there are so many election disputes and so on. In this context, we will see the working of Representation of People's Act 1951. That is another way of introducing your answer. Now having done that, we will conclude the answer in 1 or 2 line conclusion, because this is a 10 marker answer. Now I'll move forward and see what this person has done. So this person starts out by talking about how Indian Constitution empowers the Indian Parliament. Like for example, the Constitution calls for a free and fair elections, and in order for a conduct of free and fair elections, the Parliament can pass enabling legislations. In order to take care of elections, the electors, the qualification, disqualification, and so on. So then in order to give effect to this, the Parliament has passed 2 legislations, 1951 Act and 1950 Act of Representation of People's Act. So this is basically a good way of starting your introduction. It is neither strictly definitional approach, neither strictly current affairs based approach. He is basically introducing the body of his answer by placing some context. Now he moves forward and talks about some of the provisions of the Rpi Act 1951. It provides for the criteria of qualification and disqualification. This is good. This is in fact a part of the question. And then it also has provisions for the handling of election offences and disputes. If there is corruption, mala fide, etc., the Representation of People Act 1951 has provisions to handle them. In addition to this, it also has provisions for the registration of political parties and also the administrative machinery for the conduct of elections. So in this short space, what he is trying to say is that he is trying to tell me that he knows certain provisions of the Representation of People Act. Now he is not mentioning provisions like section 8, section 8A and so on, but then he is trying to tell me the in and out of the act. So he is basically creating a link of communication of knowledge between himself and me by talking about this act as such. Now he moves forward and talks about the criteria of disqualification. This is the basic crux of the answer, because this is what has been directly asked. What are the criteria of disqualification? The first criteria is the conviction for an offense where the jail term is more than 2 years, and if this person gets disqualified on this particular provision, he gets disqualified for how many years? About 6 years. And in addition to this, if you take part in election offenses like corruption, rigging, booth rigging and so on, then also you are prone for disqualification. In addition to this, you are supposed to lodge your election expenses. This is the expense that I have incurred, this is the areas in which I have spent, so these are the accounts that I have to lodge with my election commission. But if I do not do it in time, then I become prone to disqualification under Representation of People Act 1951. In addition to this, if I hold office of profit, especially in a corporation in which there is 25% stake for the government, now that is a very deep fact, you don't have to know it, but if you have an office of profit, you become basically ineligible, you become disqualified. In addition to this, if you practice social crimes like untouchability, dowry, hate speech and so on, these are also certain grounds for the criteria of disqualification. Now he has given me 5 good points for the criteria of disqualification. Now he has to give me the remedies. Let's see what he does. The remedies against the disqualification are, first thing, not everybody can pass the disqualification order. It has to be passed by the highest authority, which is the president. Even if president in case of the MPs and governor in the case of MLAs, even if they were to pass this disqualification order, they have to first take the permission of Election Commission of India. They have to take the permission of Election Commission of India. So that is a check against arbitrary disqualification, because Election Commission of India is an independent body. The hope is that it will not disqualify people arbitrarily. So when it gives recommendation, it will only give good recommendations. That is the idea. So this is one kind of remedy against disqualification. In addition to this, even if I were to get disqualified, if let's say I become disqualified, even after that, Election Commission of India has the power to restore, has the power to remove the disqualification, first thing, or decrease the span of my disqualification, second thing. These two powers are held by the Election Commission of India. That is another check, another way in which I can redress my grievance. In addition to this, if I am disqualified, I can immediately file an election petition in the concerned High Court. And even if the High Court goes against me, I can directly go to the Supreme Court by the way of appeal. So this is another check. I can go to the High Court, I can go to the Supreme Court, and then get my grievance redressed. So there are nice points written under the disqualification of 1951. Now he has written only 3 points. This is because there are only these are the most solid points that are there under remedies. If you find any new points, please let us know in the comment section. But this should be sufficient in order to write a 10-marker question. Now all he has to do is to probably give certain reforms. So he's finished with his remedies. This is the best he could recall, because in a static question what happens is you can't recall much. In current affairs question, either you recall points and write, or you generate points by connecting different areas to that particular question and then you write your answer. But in questions like this, what are the powers of the president? Can you create new points? No, there are only certain powers of the president. So this is one of those questions. So he has finished with these points. Now he's moving forward. He's talking about certain suggested reforms. First is the protection of honest legislators. So the Rpi Act 1951, at the moment, he is basically trying to establish a balance between honest legislators and disqualifying the corrupt legislators. But this balance is something really difficult to maintain, which is why different provisions of the Rpi Act 1951 are coming under the debate these days. So I would like you all to list down certain debates in relation to Rpi 1951, like section 8 and so on. So these debates have been in there for quite some time. I want you all to write them down. In addition to this, there is Model Code of Conduct. So Model Code of Conduct basically tries to decrease corruption, create a level playing field between different political parties, and it tries to increase the electoral participation and so on. But then Model Code of Conduct doesn't have an legislative backing. But if you bring Model Code of Conduct under RPA 1951, whatever is the outcome envisaged by RPA 1951, that is to conduct free and fair elections, that becomes fulfilled. So you have to bring Model Code of Conduct under RPA 1951. In addition to this, you also have to give RPA 1951 the power to de-recognize political parties. At the moment, it can only recognize political parties, it cannot de-recognize them, and this power should be given under Representation of People Act 1951. So he moves forward and gives a conclusion. Elections are the lifeblood of a democracy. Timely reforms are thus needed for the conduct of free and fair elections. So this is the answer that has been written. He has addressed the first few subheadings really well, but under suggested reforms he has tried to give new points, but he could have done better, but it is alright. Overall, he has addressed all the aspects of the question. He also has given some value addition. This is more or less an above average answer. In fact, it is a good answer. The conclusion could have been better in the sense the conclusion could have been in tune with the Representation of People's Act 1951. So if you all have extra points, please write them down in the comment section for the benefit of all. That should be the discussion for the day. I'll see you all tomorrow with the next question. Thank you all. Bye.